Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Synergen Leadership Podcast. Today's interview with Richard Coleman, he's CEO of a company called the Interchange, I think is quite interesting for a number of reasons. One in particular is Richard talks about his journey through very large corporates and some of the challenges that he saw in leadership at large corporates versus, moving into a smaller business now where he's got a closer relationship with his people and how he plans to grow that business. I think shed some insight into how Richard approaches leadership. So happy listening and really looking forward to hearing what you think.
Welcome to the Synergen Leadership Podcast with Julian. Julian speaks with leaders from around Australia to bring you their leadership story and share their insights about being a leader. To further help you build your leadership capability, Julian shares his own insights about leadership and the tools and techniques he uses as a leader.
Thanks, Richard, for taking the time to be part of our podcast. I'd probably like to start off with taking you all the way back to your first leadership role and give us a little bit of insight about where you started.
Sure. It's kind of hard to say what the first leadership role was, right? So I can remember the first job where I had a team of people sort of working for me. But actually I think my first leadership role was one where I was still an individual contributor, if you like. Sure. So I did a master's degree in OHS many years ago because I'm old. My first job was as a research officer at a place called the Australian Agricultural Health Unit in Moree in northern New South Wales. The reason I think that was my first leadership role is because the work that we did there and the information that we put into the agriculture industry definitely kind of saved lives. So we were playing a kind of industry leadership role, and I played a role in that, even though I wasn't kind of, formally designated as a leader.
Yeah.
So that's my first one, I think.
Okay, and what sort of lessons did you learn from that role?
I do think I learned the lesson that leadership is more than the title, and that you can take a leadership position regardless of kind of where you sit in an organisation. Obviously, the power and scope and ability to sort of influence increases as you move up the tree. To pretend otherwise would, I think, is a bit disingenuous and a bit of a lie. But you can take a leadership position no matter where you sit.
Yeah. And would you say you had any major successes in your leadership there?
In the original position, yeah, I think so. So one of the if any of your listeners are from the agriculture industry, they're probably driving around on a tractor with a rollover protective structure, a ROPS. When I did the work that I did, those things essentially didn't exist. But when you start digging into the kind of causes of fatalities on farms, rollovers and runovers are sort of two major causes of death. The work that we did led to governments giving subsidies for rollover protection structures that ultimately went on to tractors, which now have become kind of standard issue equipment. So I think that actually getting out into the community, talking about that stuff, almost being activists in many realms, hitting the conference circuit, talking to politicians, creating discussion papers, white papers, really getting that stuff on the political agenda. Ultimately made a difference, and I think that's the biggest success. There are farm families out there that are still functioning because of the work that we did.
And any mistakes you think you made?
How long have you got? I think that the first mistake is one of sort of youth and hubris, and I know all the answers, and hard-headed, unthinking drive towards an endpoint without just being immature. I think, I'm hoping that I'll grow up soon, but I do recognise that I was very immature very early in my career.
Okay, and did you decided leadership was for you after that role?
I don't know about that. I think that I'm not one of those people who, I've ever really planned out my career. My career's kind of just happened to me a bit. I just liked doing what I was doing, and I don't think I ever gave it much more analysis than that. The opportunities that I've chased when I saw them kind of appear were always ones where there was something new and interesting, and an ability to hopefully make a difference in a kind of lasting and meaningful way. I am at heart, people use it as a criticism. I do consider myself a do-gooder in the sense that I want the world to be a better place, and I want my work to contribute to that. There would have been lots of ways through my career for me to go and make more money doing something else, but that's not why I come to work or why I sort of turn up day in and day out. And so I don't think I ever pursued leadership for its own ends. I pursued bigger and more interesting roles because of hopefully what I could achieve in them.
So you've had your first taste of leadership. What was the next sort of leadership role in your journey?
I might skip a few jobs, right? Because otherwise we'll be here all day. But my next big leadership and the most challenging leadership job for me was I got a role several years later as the head of health, safety and environment for Telstra. And when I started at Telstra, there were kind of 97 odd people in that function. But it was at a time when the organisation was essentially rapidly contracting. We were losing thousands and thousands of field technicians. We were offshoring pieces of work, and my function was not immune from that. And so I essentially went through a process that reduced that function in half. So I'd never sacked anybody. I'd never made anybody redundant. All my roles at that point have been kind of essentially about building something up. This one, generally, it did require the cutting, but I found it personally really challenging. Now, luckily, I got a lot of support from the organisation and training and sort of HR support to do that. But again, I essentially took it on my own shoulders to have those conversations. I wasn't going to outsource those to HR to have. And I learned, again, I think I learned a lot about how you do those things and kind of how you don't do those things.
Okay, and do you think you found it easier to be in that role as a leader because of your previous experience?
Yeah, I do, and I think that while I was always really aware of the personal impact of making somebody redundant, I was also aware that what the benefit was for the broader organisation, what the benefit would be for those who were kind of left behind, and I also believed that it was the right thing to do because our function, our system, all our process had become really overbuilt, over-complex and really quite bureaucratic. And so this was part of a broader simplification type process, which I, again, believed that would be the best thing for the rest of the business. I don't think I would have had that understanding had I not have had a few different roles and a few different experiences on the way through.
Yeah, okay. And what would you say were some of your biggest successes there in that role?
Again, it's pretty functionally specific, but when I started at Telstra, we had a risk assessment for the use of a tea towel.
Okay.
And it was basically, do you use a cloth tea towel or a paper tea towel, and what are the environmental impacts and safety implications of those decisions? We had a risk assessment on the provision of breastfeeding facilities. So we ran to 16 pages. The last line of the last page of which read, breastfeeding facilities should only be introduced on the basis of a local risk assessment.
Right. Okay.
We had a 60-page document for auditing and inspection of a call centre. We required people to check their ergonomic setups on a weekly basis. So we had all this processing system, and that was written and developed by people with the absolute right intent, right? But just layered bureaucratic weight on people without actually really adding any meaningful value to the organisation. So if you think about all that stuff, yet the risks of serious injury and fatality were out in the field. There were guys who had, generally men, but not always, driving around in vans out in remote parts of Australia, climbing up massive towers. And we were focused on the risk assessment of a T-tower. And so for me, it was the getting rid of all that process enabled people to actually be adults in the workplace, focus on the things that were important. And ultimately, that took about $40 million out of Telstra's workers' comp bill. Halved injury rates over about a three-year period, and just generally made the place a better place to work.
Yeah. And how do you think that evolved into that culture?
Like all these things, it evolves because people think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right? And they're tasked with, particularly in the safety world, they're tasked with doing more. And doing more is always seen as, I need to write a new process, train people some more, build a new system, collect some more data, report some more stuff, right? No one ever sits back and says, well, when you add all this stuff up, what is the impact to the person who's actually doing the real work? And what is the impact in totality to the whole organisation? And maybe the best thing we can do is actually take some of the pressure off people and take some stuff away.
Yeah.
Or if we are adding something, make sure that, on the flip side, we take something else away so that we don't increase people's burdens. A person gave me I heard an interesting quote a couple of weeks ago where someone said, we ask people to be leaders in their jobs and then we fill them up with process. So they only have really small space to be a leader because everything else is kind of laid on top of them, and they have to, do the supervision stuff, not the leadership stuff.
Do you think you got any unfinished business there when you left that role? Did you feel that way? Or?
Two things. I think I left because the organisation felt that I'd done a good job, and they gave me an operational role. So I went off and managed a whole 2,500 contractors that climb into pits and manholes and do all those kind of things in an operational sense.
Okay.
But I was happy to leave at the time. I think I cut too deeply.
Yeah.
So the unfinished business, it's not so much unfinished business as what was my learning. I cut too hard and I cut too fast. And I think it took a little while. The pendulums always swing, and I think the pendulum swung back a little bit afterwards. That's probably the right thing. And it was the right time to go and try something else.
So let's fast forward to where you are now. You're CEO of the Interchange. Let's talk a little bit about the Interchange, what you do, and your role here. And
so it's probably, I've been CEO here for just over a year. I think it's like a year and 2 days. So,
okay.
So
happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Happy anniversary.
That's the sound of the champagne corks popping. If I think back, it's probably taken 4 years to kind of get me here. In the other roles that I had, I was kind of thinking about what's next and what interests me and what drives me. So I joined just over a year ago after the previous employer that was at Asiano was taken over, and the CEO and all his direct reports, of which I was one, were set free to go and follow our dreams.
Yeah.
And it was, do I want to go back into a kind of functional head of kind of position, or do I want to do something differently? I'd been involved in a number of large-scale cultural change type programs over my career, and they were the things that A, excited me, and B, disappointed me. So excited me in that I always thought it was a great thing to do and the right thing to do, but ultimately I was disappointed in essentially what they were and how they were executed. And I felt that I could maybe do it a bit better.
Sure.
And I absolutely, and I found a business partner who kind of thought the same things, and we decided that our kind of purpose would be to do change like it's never been done before. And so the business Interchange had been going for 3 years. There was a view that we needed to grow and expand. My partner could focus in on the sort of consulting work, and I could focus in on some of the growth and business, just getting the business humming in terms of sort of operations and finances and the like. And so we came together, and we've had an amazing year. We've built along the theme of change like it's never been done before. For one client, we built a all singing, all dancing Bollywood film around safety.
Okay.
With all the themes that would be in any Bollywood film. There's a love triangle. There's a tragedy. There are some kids dancing, and it was filmed and produced in Gujarat State in India for a global client, and it's used as source content material for quite a large leadership development and change program, and it's just been amazingly successful, and people love it. We've also built a virtual reality, so the other end of the scale, if you like, we've built virtual reality experience of what it's like to witness domestic and family violence from the perspective of a child. Right. And we did that pro bono for a charity called White Lion that looks after disadvantaged youth and youth that is essentially likely to get into the juvenile justice system. So we've done work for massive global corporates, and we've done work for sort of like local charities, and there's a real sense of purpose in what we do, and a real sense of value, both to us as an organisation, the people that work here, but also to our clients. And I've never had to look back. It's been an amazing year.
And how many people work in Interchange?
So we've got 12 full-time employees at the moment. On any given day, there can be up to kind of 30 people sort of out doing work for us. So obviously we use a reasonable contractor base, but that fluctuates. So potentially, if a couple of signatures get put on a few pages in the next few weeks, we'll probably have 50 or 60 people working for us in the new year, and that's great. It's great because there's a healthy business that's growing well that our customers value and prepared to invest in. But it's also great because it just makes the place feel like it's humming and there's energy and people are excited, and so just little things like we're about to hire a couple of graduates or almost graduates just to bring them in on a sort of 3 month rotation. Just the idea of being able to kind of develop some young people, give them a wonderful experience. If it doesn't work out and they don't stay, so be it. We know that they'll have had an experience that they can use then to kind of grow their own careers. It's just little things like that make everyone kind of smile.
Okay. So a bit of a random question for you. What do you think one of the biggest myths on leadership is?
I think it's the born with, the kind of, there are those who are leaders and there are those who aren't. I think that's rubbish. I think firstly, most people that do kind of end up with the title CEO or some other big job, most of it was luck. There's a fair bit of timing and right person, right place, but we kind of convince ourselves that it's somehow a moral and genetic superiority or intellectual superiority that got us that position. I think that's you're kidding yourself if that's what you think. And I do think that the reality is many people constantly learn and you grow, and you can develop the skills necessary to be a decent leader.
Yeah, sure. So how would you describe yourself as a leader?
If I was being self-critical, I would say that I find it hard to consistently focus on one topic. I'm a bit of a goldfish. It's like, oh, look, something shiny. Oh, there's a castle.
Something shiny.
Something shiny. So I get excited and I follow things and I get ideas and I want to do stuff and we should make that, all bells and whistles. And then kindly somebody points out that, it's probably not the best idea I've ever had. If I was being kind of self-complimentary, I'd almost say the same thing and say I bring a level of kind of keenness and excitement and hopefully motivation to the work that we do. And yes, I have lots of ideas. That's great. So long as sort of 1 out of 20 kind of pays off and comes off.
Do you have a way you manage that and the influence that has on the people here?
Yeah, so I have one really quite formal way, which is my business partner and I have a third-party independent advisor coach who comes in every couple of weeks and talks about how that relationship's playing out, how the business is growing, what's going on, and can provide us that real kind of sounding board for, are you kind of staying within the tram lines here or are we going off the reservation a bit? which is really, really useful. It also enables us to have conversations about relationship stuff that is often hard. It's nice if there's a third person kind of going, well, what happened then, and how did that play out? So that's one kind of quite formal way. The other one is that we genuinely hire for difference here.
Okay. So
we don't want everybody who's a goldfish and off looking after the shiny things. We need some real project-focused, task-driven, completed type people as well.
Yeah.
As well as, if we have a whole range of really creative types who are, animators and digital people and filmmakers and all those kinds of things, not my skill set. So yeah. I think the ability to kind of have that formal, high-level kind of check-in, we hire right. We're also, we have the standard operating rhythm, and we seek feedback. But again, I think as a CEO, if you think you ask for feedback and you're getting it straight, again, you're probably kidding yourself.
Yeah.
There is a power differential, and people are often reluctant to speak truth to power. So that's one of the reasons I think that external third party sort of looking is quite useful.
Yeah. And how did you find that third party? Was that something that you just made a conscious decision to do, or was that something you'd done before?
So I joined an existing business.
Yeah.
And that third party was already providing some sort of strategy advice to the business. And then, we started going, hang on, what would be really useful is not so much the strategy advice, because we think we've got that in-house now. It's more, let's actually think about how we're operating as a sort of leadership team.
Yeah, right, okay. And what would you say that your biggest challenge as a leader is?
Look, from a purely business perspective, it's growth, right? It's finding the opportunities that enable us to do the things that we want to do with relatively like-minded organisations who are prepared to, invest in their people and often in their customers or whatever the kind of target issue is that we're working with. So we work across a whole range of sort of cultural issues, be that customer centricity, diversity and inclusion. We do a lot of health and safety stuff, essentially, that flows from my network. But culture, we do a lot of work with culture more broadly. So it's finding those growth opportunities that, again, match who we are and what we do. I think personally, it's the balance of caring for people and caring for the business. So this is a relatively small business. We talked about the numbers before. So I know everybody. I know their dogs and their kids, and where they live. And so I feel a level of responsibility for them that is higher than I have ever perhaps felt before in other roles, particularly kind of corporate roles. And so you marry that with this need for growth, because with growth comes certainty, and jobs and all those things is one that I find kind of personally challenging.
Yeah.
I have to. But it's a challenge and responsibility that I hope never goes away, in the sense that it's probably a motivated driver, for me. I'm not just looking after making sure my kids get Christmas presents. I'm making sure that everybody's kids get Christmas presents.
Sure. And do you have that function yourself in terms of the growth of the business? Is that something you take on personally?
So it's a shared one. So there's a number of people, but with the title of CEO, I think comes ultimate responsibility for that. I'm not doing the BD calls and those things. I do some to people that I know, but it's not one of my targets to do X number of calls or have X number of meetings. But I'm certainly over the detail of how that's being done, and I do take it as a personal responsibility. The other one that I think is really important is being the owner of the values, right? So making sure that the things that we do, so we don't just chase revenue for revenue's sake, and we don't just chase growth for growth's sake. If we are true to who we want to be, and we want to do change like it's never been done before, we want to be creative, we want to hold each other accountable, we want to care for ourselves and for our customers, then we have to make calls about the kind of work that we don't do.
Yeah.
And the kind of organisations that we don't work with, and that's an obligation and a responsibility that I think firmly does ultimately sit with me.
Yeah, and do you find that challenging to make that call?
Yeah, I do. So one of the ones, there's, I'm not a personal fan of the pokey industry, right? Yeah. And so, because I think I think it was Tim Costello said that pokies for us are what guns are to Americans.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's kind of intertwined into our society, and they both have, it's a different type of damage, but they both cause damage. Do we work with gambling companies? Would be a question that we would kind of battle with. Now, I think it would depend on. So it's a live ethical values-based kind of question. I think it would depend on the type of work, right? So if somebody said to me, there is a gambling company that manages rural race meets, and there's health and safety issues with, people who are track attendants, for example, and there's a risk to kind of life and limb. Do I go, well, you're a gambling company, I'm not going to work with you? Or do I go, well, actually, we want to care for people, we want to do the right thing. We think we have a skill set that could actually help those people be better. That's not a live issue for us. It's not a question that got asked, but it'd be one that ultimately I'd have to come to an answer on.
And are there any particular tools, models, frameworks that you're a big fan of that you recommend people have a look at?
I'm not one for book learned. So we, as a business, we're very much a bespoke business, right? Yeah. So we don't have a set of tools and frameworks that we kind of encourage our clients to follow. We build things from we do a lot of discovery. What are your issues? We do focus groups and interviews and surveys, and we develop solutions from that kind of source data. Personally, look, I think the whole kind of change management literature is really interesting. So, big fan of Cotter, Edgar Schein, I think it was. There's a few of those kind of. It's not for me anymore the kind of MBA type authors who are influential. The guys who've written the change books, Five Forces.
Porters,
all that sort of stuff. And so I've been through all those corporate learning programs where we've had all that stuff. I think the challenge for leaders now is to stay on top of emerging stuff, right? Yeah. So it's not the books that were written 10, 15 years ago, because they're kind of out of date. My source of information and what's coming next is Twitter.
Yeah, okay.
So I spend a lot of time on Twitter. I follow MIT Sloan,
okay.
So the Sloan Business School at MIT. I follow all the major global kind of consulting companies, and what I do with them is I don't follow what they say. I go, who are they referencing? Then I go to try and find that person or what they're working on. I want to know. I follow digital trends. So what's happening with artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, big data, autonomous vehicles. But I think this stuff is coming like a freight train into the businesses that I work with, and many are, particularly in the HR type functions, are blissfully unaware of what's about to happen. And I think that we can help navigate those changes in the coming years. There's obviously going to be impacts on employment. There's going to be impacts on the nature of jobs that are left. Yeah. And we need to sensibly plan for and execute those changes. So I'm not so much going to the business books, I'm going to what's coming next.
Okay, so explore that a bit further.
Yeah.
What do you think some of the impacts of some of those things are going to have on leadership?
I think there's a leadership strategy question today around, so what is the strategy for the digital impact on your business? And that's not necessarily a change in kind of how you be a leader. It's just what is one of my outputs. My outputs is going, okay, so I've got a plan for this business in 3 years. Have I even thought about digital? Have I even thought about platforms? The Uberization of whatever it is that I do, whatever it is my business is in. Have I thought about how I access skills and capabilities of people in a different way to the kind of current standard employment type models? I think that there's a leadership capability gap in understanding that stuff that people really need to self-plug. First of all, there needs to be some sort of awareness that it's coming, and then go, all right, I need to sort of self-plug it. I think ultimately, when some of these changes hit, particularly kind of some of the data and analytics stuff, people aren't going to value so much your MBA that did where you learnt financial analysis, because it's going to be done for you, right? The outputs are going to come. You don't have to sit down and pore over reams and reams of spreadsheets, but the what won't change is kind of how you have to interact with other humans. So I think what will happen is there'll be a downplaying of some of the technical high-end so-called management leadership type skills, and an upswing in what's traditionally been called soft skills. I don't think I'm not one of those people who uses that term. I don't think they are soft skills. I think they're really hard skills. But I think that would be the change.
And with the organisations that you work with, do you think leaders are accepting that change, prepared for that change, embracing that change?
I think it's mixed, right? The published studies around this stuff say that there's only 25% of kind of senior executive leaders in this country who know and can articulate what's going to happen to their industry in the next 3 to 5 years through the impacts of digital. So that says that it would be highly unlikely in my mind that if that's the case at the top level, people who are being exposed to this kind of thinking, if only 25% of those people have got it, then I think the numbers lower down the organisation would be lower still. You'll always find somebody, buried in an organisation somewhere who's got a really clear understanding and who knows what's about to happen and a plan for it. I suspect in many businesses they are buried and they're not being listened to.
Yeah, sure. And when you go into an organisation and you share what you're doing with AI and augmented reality and everything else, how do they embrace it?
I think everyone's interested.
Yeah.
But I think they're still waiting.
Okay.
So, every now and again we've had people go, that's fantastic, can we buy some of that, please do it, help me do it now. But I've also had lots of people going, I might just, no, I don't think that's for us. I don't think we're ready. People aren't computer literate, You kind of go, yes, they are. Look at everybody on their phone, look at everybody on their iPad.
Yeah.
People are using this technology now, and it's going to happen, more and more. I think consumer society will lead the way, and in many ways businesses will catch up.
And you mentioned earlier about networking. It's an area of leadership which I'm particularly interested in. Yeah. So how do you go about networking? What's the value in networking for you? What do you see people doing wrong or right?
Yeah, I must admit, I don't think I'm great at it. Okay. So I probably don't come across as one because I know you reasonably well. So I can be, but I'm quite an introvert. So people will go, no, you're not. Well, I need to be comfortable with people before I sort of open up. So I'm not great in that whole walk into a room. Hi, how you going? Tell me something you're working on. How can we help? I can stand up in front of 1,000 people and do a talk, and I can have conversations with people, but where that sort of standardised model of networking does me in a bit. So I tend to do it via introduction. So if somebody can kind of, if I can meet one-on-one with somebody via introduction, I'm much more likely to do that than go to some random meet-up somewhere and sort of work the room.
Yeah, I'm similar. That's why LinkedIn is
that's right.
Is a platform for me.
And look, I think a lot of people rightly disparage LinkedIn, but I've taken the view in the last year that I'll be active and I'll be constructive, and and I will hopefully post things that add value to others.
Yeah.
And I'll do that, as regularly as I can. I try and do, something at least every kind of second day. And I don't advertise on LinkedIn. I think I might have done. Actually, I'll tell you, when we launched our domestic and family violence, actually we did publish some stuff about what we're doing. It was essentially marketing, but I think that's once in a year. And the reason for that again is that I just saw incredible value in that, and it was a piece of work that I know that kind of no one else had really ever done. So I saw value in letting people know about that piece of work, but I don't sell the company.
Yeah.
I try and add value to my network, and I value that when other people do it.
Yeah.
So and I'll quite often, the things that I share and the things that I comment on are where it's obvious to me that somebody's gone, hey, I've got something that's really interesting and valuable here. You guys, somebody else might gets value out of it. I think if we all did that on LinkedIn, it would be a hell of a lot better place.
Yeah. It's becoming very crowded at the moment.
Yeah. And, stop posting memes, people. I don't want a picture with some sort of meme type thing. Go away.
Yeah. It's a bit like that. Yeah. And the more connections you get, the more of that happens.
And if anybody's thinking about posting that picture of the wolves, where there's the thing with the one wolf at the front, is don't do that. It's been debunked 27 million thousand times, and that doesn't add value. That's not good. Don't do that.
So, how do you continue your development as a leader? How do you make that a focus for yourself?
I wouldn't say that I put sort of hard time to do that, but I do read pretty, even though I said I don't kind of read management books, I try and read broadly and outside the realm of what I do. I like to, when I go to kind of conferences and things, I deliberately seek out those people who I think I probably won't agree with, because I like the idea of having my mental models challenged a bit. And I may still walk out of it still not agreeing, but I'll have kind of tested my thinking a bit, and in some cases I might, the better ones I've actually learned something and have actually changed my opinion. We also, again, through that process I talked about the internal kind of three-way discussions, we do talk a lot about how we're showing up as leaders and what we can do to be better about that. We have all the standard stuff. We have one-on-ones with staff, and we do seek feedback and all those kind of things, but it's predominantly I try and learn from my interactions with other people. One of the good things about my job is I do get to interact with a lot of fairly senior people, like in some pretty big businesses. And when I'm in those interactions, I'm deliberately kind of finding stuff. Oh, it was interesting how they approached that problem, or that was a kind of challenging question. I like where that kind of went to, and so I'm using that all the time to kind of calibrate how I'm performing and where I can kind of get better at things. My former CEO, who is now the chairman of Telstra, John Mullen, I worked very closely with John, and he was a great boss for me for sort of three and a half, nearly 4 years. And I spent a lot of time not just listening to what he said, but watching kind of how he behaved and trying to learn from that. It wasn't a kind of formal mentoring kind of arrangement by any stretch of the imagination, but just watching the way that he managed poor performance in a really kind of personally respectful way, the way that he asked questions genuinely for understanding, and not to kind of prove his own point, was amazing. And so I learn a lot through observation is probably the short answer.
Yeah, so you mentioned John was sort of almost an informal mentor.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a formal mentoring program or anything like that?
I've been a mentor to others.
Okay.
And in fact, it's a very timely question because we have had an internal discussion about all of us getting mentors.
Okay.
So I am going to arrange a mentor. I think it's a really good idea. And I actually would love to do the whole reverse mentoring and get somebody that was, 25, and that'd be a wonderful thing, I think. So I'll probably look for two.
Yeah, it is a passion of mine. It's a great feeling when you are mentoring someone and you see that development.
Yeah. So I currently mentor 3 people outside the organisation.
Okay.
I think it's time for me to have a more formal structure for myself.
Yeah, and is that a formal approach you have with those 3 people?
Yeah.
That's a big commitment, taking on 3.
Yeah, well, sort of one is we're kind of tailing off a bit, but 2 are, so one's probably every 6 months, but the other 2 are kind of 3 monthly and as needed. Give me a call. Any questions?
So the biggest leadership goal you've got in the coming year, 2018?
I'm not sure whether I can kind of nail it to a leadership goal. I've got a business goal to kind of double the size of this business and get us in a brand spanking new, well, a very old building that's been renovated to look brand spanking new, to get us all together and kind of humming as a team. So I guess if I was to distill it to leadership, it's just continuing to make this team hum.
Yep.
I think we're doing 80 out of 100 now.
Yeah.
It's time to get to kind of 95. And some of that is structural. Some of that is some of it is which people are working on which projects. Some of it's clarity from us, from me and my partner around and structure and goals and all those things. Some of it's development. Again, making sure that we have the right skills, both in-house, and we continue to grow those, and then we have access to the kind of right skills outside. So there's, let's call it, I want to make the team hum.
Okay. What about any leaders that inspire you or motivate you? Are there any there that stand out for you at the moment?
For me, it's kind of it's the historic, well, not all historical, but it's the Gandhi, oh my God, I've got a horrible mental blank. I can see the man's face. Mandela, it's those people who made huge change, and who delivered it fundamentally reframed the societies that they were in ways that weren't particularly, bombastic or angry. Yeah. But the ability for Mandela to forgive was just, that's inspiring. That's inspiring. I think the current sort of business leader that I admire the most would be Elon Musk.
Okay.
And again, but it's the big, hairy, audacious goals of Elon Musk that I've never read a biography. I don't know that much about the man personally, so I'm really only seeing the public persona. But hey, let's create a colony on Mars.
Yeah.
Let's fundamentally re-engineer transport, across the globe. Let's make renewables a real thing. Yeah. So the fact that he just is prepared to give those things a go. And in ways that appear at this point to be economically viable, it's just amazing. The rest of us are, I don't know, what are we doing? We're just playing around the edges, aren't we?
Yeah, he certainly sets a standard high for aiming big, doesn't he?
Yeah, and so again, if I carried on, it would be the kind of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation stuff. Yeah. Again, let's eradicate malaria.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go do that.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome. So I do like people who go, we're going to do things in a big way. We're going to make a real difference. And so, in our own small way, which sounds obviously contradictory, we try and do the same things. Yeah. Let's do change like it's never been done before.
And so if people want to find out more about you and the Interchange, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, we have a website, www.theinterchange.com.au, and we're actually going through a process of updating that. You can find the Interchange on Twitter. You can just search the Interchange. You can find me on Twitter. You can search Richard Coleman. You can find me. And I'm absolutely prepared to connect with anybody on LinkedIn, particularly if you're prepared to just put something in the message that you heard me on the podcast.
Thank you.
I do tend to say no to people that are obviously trying to sell me something straight up.
Yeah.
Or from some outsourcing business that wants me to outsource everything to someone else.
Yeah, my standing list of invitations is growing rapidly, the ones I won't accept.
Yeah.
You know why they're contacting you.
Yeah, I don't know this person, don't know this person. But hopefully I'll say yes to people.
All right. And any last views on leadership which you think are important to share?
I think I'll reiterate what I said at the start. It's no one is born to it. You can develop into it. No, and what goes with that is no one is ever the finished product. You have to attempt to keep learning in your own way. You'll make mistakes, and sometimes it can be lonely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard, for the chat, and I look forward to talking again soon.
No worries, Julian. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.
So.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Synergen Leadership Podcast. I trust you found it interesting. A couple of things. If you could go online and leave a review of the podcast, that would be great. Really help us in spreading awareness of the podcast. Happy for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. And if you want to shoot me through an email, julian@synergengroup.com.au. See you next time.